Hi, this is North of 48. It's November the 18th, and we have Miles Spencer with us today. He's an author with Wells Jones on A Line in the Sand. It's a novel. It captures the essence of the Middle East with a richly detailed historical fiction of two lifelong friends, following clues dropped by Lawrence of Arabia. And I'm hoping that he can shed some light on the Middle East situation or on the Arabian population in general. Welcome, Miles. How are you, sir?
Hey, it's really a pleasure to be on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your time in this, and I appreciate your reaching out. And let's talk a little bit about your novel. Why did you and um, Mr. Jones decide to write this novel?
I'm gonna go back a few years. We were after 9/11, two Americans struggling to figure out just exactly what was driving the Middle East and how could something like that actually happen. We were
Mhm.
at a loss. Had done some reading, watched some media, but didn't really feel like it was getting us anywhere. But I was reading one book. It was Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. And I was so impressed with how he really had a feel for the people and the culture and the cuisine and the geography, obviously, and the strategic importance of the area. And as Wells was making his way through Connecticut on a visit in the early fall, asked me what I was reading. I told him. I said, "What are you reading?" He said, "Same thing." I said, "How far are you?" So I'm done. "Where are you?" "I'm done as well." It's like, "Well, what do we do next?" Well, it's like, we ought to go. We ought to go and retrace the steps of T.E. Lawrence and Seven Pillars of Wisdom. That's the only way we would really know the people and the culture and the region and get a feel for it. So we were lucky enough to get an invitation to speak at YPO Riyadh, promoting a prior book that I had written on entrepreneurship. I guess you did a good job because afterwards they said, as happens in KSA, that's Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, what else can we do for you? And we said, well, we'd like to hike 1,100 miles through the deserts of Saudi, Jordan, and Syria. And they said, let's go. And so we began in Jeddah. And that was the real life experience of Miles and Wells, which became, after, I'm going to say October 8th of last year, a real driving uh, motivation for getting the book out. And then it's done very well, which is proves that you can be a good storyteller, and eventually people learn some history from it.
Well, it's highly rated on Amazon, and you can get the Kindle and audiobook and the paper book on Amazon. And you've got a 4.6% on Goodreads, so that's very high. And a lot of the reviews say that they enjoyed it and they learned a lot. So that's kudos to you guys.
Thank you very much. First effort as a historical fiction. We have more coming. Same characters
Right.
in different places of the world, but this was our first effort, and obviously it helps not just to research it, but to be there and to have experienced the things
Sure.
ourselves. And I think perhaps what the reviewers are saying is that authenticity plays through on the page.
Well, okay, that's so 9/11 drove you to try to understand the Middle East more. That's my take from what you said. Did you understand through your travels the Middle East more and the relation to Israel?
I think the key to that question and answer is managing expectations, right? You keep your expectations low and you're generally not disappointed. We knew absolutely nothing, um, or it felt like we knew next to nothing. We had read virtually everything in the library we could get our hands on, um, about uh, about T. Lawrence about the Middle East, especially about the history of the last 100 years there, which
Mhm.
we think really drove us to where we are today. I mean, you go about 1,000 years, and there's some stories to be told there, the
Oh yeah.
Crusades, etc. But we focused on the last 100 years, and I feel you could draw a through line from the teens, the 19 teens, and the 20 teens, and what's happened up to today. And I would expect will continue to happen in my lifetime because of the seeds that were sown then. And so telling a story that can inform uh, Westerners about the history of that unique place, we felt, look, when something like 9/11 happens, something like October 7th happens, etc., it's like, okay, I just had a son walk through here, and someday, God bless, I may have grandchildren, and they will undoubtedly ask me, so what did you do?
Mhm.
And so our adventures, Wells and I, they're not just check the box. I climbed this 20,000 peak. I dove, down to this wreck, to this depth. I ran this marathon. Those are personal bests. That's great. But we're looking for adventures with purpose that allow us to discover things, but then if we can tell our story, allows others to discover things as well. So did it meet my expectations? It exceeded them. Do I feel like I know the Middle East now? No way. Um, I'm beginning to think no one does. But do I understand more each day? Absolutely.
T. Lawrence, what drove you to what drives you about T. Lawrence? What are you attracted to by his writing?
Well, um, yeah, I started off with the movie, but that was years ago with my
Yeah, yeah.
father. Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia. This Peter O'Toole, who's a full foot taller than Lawrence
The
actually
blue-eyed
was.
sheik right there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, Lawrence was a tiny guy.
Yeah.
And he was a curious kid. His ability to endure pain on a personal level was probably unlike any man that I've ever read about. Of course, it's generally him doing the reporting, but he rode a bicycle around France so he could sketch Crusader castles for his thesis at Oxford, right? In a summer. The Tour de France guys would tip their hat to that. He did the same thing in the Levant. He was recruited by Hogarth from the Ashmolean to go and be an archaeologist at the time Mesopotamia, and he picked that up incredibly quickly, as he did with languages. He was quite a cartographer and was working as a map maker, which is essentially a spy pre-Arab revolt, and was able to somehow get the tribes of the Western Peninsula together enough to unseat the Ottoman Turks. He was also a man of probably some moral uh, turmoil. That's an understatement. Um, because the things that he was forced to do or choose to do on behalf of his country, in the end, I think, tipped off 100 years of turmoil in the Middle East. And I refer to basically the combination of Sykes-Picot on one side and the promise to the Arabs in the Arab Revolt, which was, you get to the finish line in Damascus, you got the kingdom of, you can have all the sand you want. Um, and so much so that uh, Faisal, believing this, um, did meet with uh, Chaim Weizmann and T.E. Lawrence in the tent of Lowell Thomas, believe it or not, and signed this little side letter, which from his perspective at the time was that if I'm going to have all this kingdom promised to me by the Brits, of course, the Jews can have Palestine. It's fine. They've been there for a long time. It's good. We'll be fine. He did put on the bottom of the Weitzman Faisal letter, as it's referred to, assuming all the promises are kept to us, we're good for all of our promises, right? So that was his little codicil, but I understand why he wrote that. And in the end, we uh, didn't treat the region well, not the least of which was Faisal and his people. So
True, true. I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially in 1888, a lot of the Ottomans were tolerant of the Jewish people.
absolutely,
And
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and there was 24,000 Jews living in Palestine at the time compared to nearly 550,000 Arabians. Um,
Numbers sound accurate, and
mhm,
Faisal was actually held under house arrest by the Ottomans for quite some time because that kept his dad, who was ruling the Hejaz, Medina, and Mecca, and the holy cities, in line,
right.
and so continuing that. I mean, I oversimplify, but everybody getting along in the region. It wasn't really a contentious topic at the time.
True. But after more, especially after the Second World War, and prior to that, with the Jewish people going into Israel, into the Palestinian lands, then the Jews in Saudi and Iran and elsewhere left because they weren't treated quite nice. That's my understanding of it anyway. So they went to Israel. It's almost like the Arabians forced the Jews to go there from their lands as well, because Iran used to have a huge Jewish population,
Sure.
right?
Well, I think you can go all up and down the scale there, Walter. Obviously the Germans did not treat them well at all, Second World War. But neither did the Russians during the Revolution and the pogroms there, and
And
that
for
began the migrations. That was to 20 some years earlier than that. The Balfour Declaration, to my read, was that Lord Balfour was writing to Rothschild in searching for a homeland for the Jews. In other words, not here in England, right?
Mhm.
And there were other there were other locations that were proposed
I
as
think there
far
was a
afield. I
state in the United States too, as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Ceylon, Sri Lanka, somewhere in South Equatorial Africa,
Mhm.
and I'm surprised nobody suggested Germany after the Second World War,
Yeah.
but it wasn't per se Israel in those early days. They were
Mhm.
trying to figure out a different place. So uh, to the extent there was a Jewish migration out of other um, Muslim majority Arabian Peninsula countries for treatment. I, they were probably no worse than some of the Western powers in terms of their treatment, right? So the question is, everybody, everybody wants to leave, but where are they going to go? And one of the points in my book, and this applies to both sides of this debate, is people need to live somewhere, right? And that's why drawing lines in the sand when you're not on the ground to actually know the effects of the same,
Mhm.
frankly, it's quite dangerous.
It is, and that brings us, because there were various wars to try to get Israel to capitulate. The Yom Kippur War comes to mind, and
Of course.
now geez, Willikers, now we're into politics where the Israeli government with Netanyahu maybe isn't looked fondly. Uh, However, they are in charge, and Hamas did kill 1,400 Israelis. Um, what's is there an off ramp for this at all? Is this, you know, I know it's a big question,
Big
but
question. And
but
I'm a simple guy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that didn't stay at home.
go Steelers.
And go Steelers. So uh I've had the benefit of some personal experience, and I'll speak just from my personal experience.
I would very much
Uh,
appreciate that.
y- yeah, I think that once again, the things that were set up, the things we're experiencing now were set up 100 years ago. You have geopolitics at play. We've just been discussing Balfour and Chaim Weizmann and Sykes-Picot. You have religion at play.
Mm,
The three great religions of the deserts, which my personal experience was there are much more commonalities than there are differences. The differences are magnified. That makes the headlines, that gets the ratings. But my experience was there was so much more commonality between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism than
mm,
there were differences, including one day we were at an archaeological site called Magar al-Sheab, the northern Saudi desert, not far from the Jordanian border, not far from Israel. And our guide is saying, Ibrahim this, Hagar that, Ezra this. Like, those are Christian prophets. Did you know that?
mm.
He said, no, they're in the Quran. Like, they're what? It's like, yes. So I called my buddy in Tel Aviv and I said, look, I'm going to name a dozen prophets that I'm hearing stories about over here. Why don't you tell me how many are in the Torah? And we went 12 for 12 and then we quit. So the funny thing was the commonalities of the prophets and the stories and where they came from, etc., to me are much greater than the differences. It's just that the differences get magnified. So until people start to understand that, the geopolitics, and number three, look, 100 years ago, they didn't quite know it. Churchill had converted the Royal Navy or had decided to convert the Royal Navy from coal to petroleum so that the sun never set on the empire. Um, and they cut a deal with Persia at the time, which seemed to be, quick and quick and dirty access to that petroleum. So they had hints of it, but nobody knew at the time what was beneath the soil in the Saudi Peninsula. It wasn't even the Saudi Peninsula at the time. It was 100 different tribes. Um, and so understanding what natural resources have done to the region is crucial.
Well, it's a man-made borders, right?
Oh,
Saudi, Jordan, and all this. There was no such thing, and then we made them a thing. We made them a thing like Palestine and the West Bank and Gaza and Israel,
we did.
and now we have authoritarian governments there, and like the Saudis, been kind of bad faith actors here and there. I'm thinking about Khashoggi in Turkey with his assassination, and I the politics that run through the region. Uh, that's hard to navigate, is it? Is it not? Uh,
Uh, Luckily, I'm not a politician.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think you refer to um, a time in Saudi's recent history in which there was a bit of a power vacuum or the perception thereof.
Hmm.
Someone stepped into that. This is Saudi, and so we needed to get with the new program. Uh, and I don't know any more than you as to what exactly went down in Istanbul that day. That may not have been the only example of that,
Hmm.
but when when I look at Saudi's arc going forward, um, I think they're frankly ideally positioned to modernize in a region that is generally moving slowly. And I think if I understand correctly, they're close to signing the Abraham Accords. I almost said Ibrahim and Abraham, but
Mhm.
that's the same prophet. And that would have been Egypt and Saudi and Israel signing an accord, which left Iran as the odd man out
That's
right
right.
around right
Did
around October 7th, right?
have you had a chance to get up to Persia or into Iran at all?
I have not.
No, that would be
Uh,
fascinating, the
yeah.
history.
Yes, for sure. The times that we've been there, you kind of have to pick the countries that you want to visit most,
Right.
and it's sort of difficult to mix
Mhm.
and match. So,
Well, it looks like all these guys, including Israel, are ganging up on Iran, and probably rightfully so, as they've financed Hamas and Hezbollah, who are creating havoc in the area. Can we talk a little bit about Lebanon? I
sure.
mean, that was such a beautiful country at one time. I know some people from Lebanon, Lebanese Christians and stuff, and now it's just been racked by violence, by graft, by corruption, and Hezbollah now seems to have their hands up and saying, "Please don't attack us anymore."
Well, I haven't heard that recent development, but yes, look, Lebanon, the Levant,
Mhm.
plays a critical role in our book, as it did in the Crusades, as it did in French history in the region. And it is, I'll attest to it. I've been there. It's an absolutely beautiful country.
Mhm.
You could ski in the morning and and snorkel in the afternoon, so I would say. Um, and it has been um, racked by unrest
Mhm.
for a generation at least. Sometimes it calms down, sometimes it flares up. The reality is, um, they they live too close to Turkey,
Mhm.
Syria, and Israel. It's a tough neighborhood, right? It's a
Right.
very tough neighborhood. And obviously, Hezbollah is somewhere between an occupying force and a political party and a community service,
Mhm.
right? And to a certain extent, you could say the same of Hamas and Houthi, but clearly a proxy of Iran. And those tentacles may be in the process of being severed.
Mhm.
Um,
The
the
conversations you've had with people in these regions, um, do they mention the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel? Are they, what is, because that can't be, I suppose it's a focus on them, but they want to live their lives, right? How
You
does,
hit it, Walter. I mean,
uh,
people want to live their lives. Again, there is always a small sliver on every side looking to amplify every difference
mhm,
and foment discontent and revolution and the rest, right? But so many of them, my experience was on every side, just wants to live their lives. They just want to go to school and learn something and be someone. And again, I'm going to talk. So it's a West Bank story, but I knew students that would walk 5 minutes to school, university, brilliant students, before the wall was built, and that commute became a 4 to 6 hours a day after it was built, and that's what they had to do to get to school
mhm,
each day. Um, and are there bad apples in there? Absolutely. People have asked me, oh, well, everybody you met with was nice, because why would they reveal themselves as bad apples, right?
Mhm.
Um, we did meet some um, impassioned advocates for each point of view. We did have uh, some experience with the neighbor of the family that had two of the 9/11 hijackers in it. So we were that close to uh, people
Wow.
that had uh, those thoughts, and a lot of it festers back to there was a passage from T.E. Lawrence which said, it's so much better to have these people do it themselves and their way and muck it up than us roll in and tell them how to do it and get it done perfectly, in our opinion, because the resentment just grows.
Right.
It's
Um, the people in Gaza and in the West Bank, the Palestinians, I know they've when they were in Jordan, they caused trouble there, and the King of Jordan says, "Okay, no more there." They're not. They were in Egypt. They caused trouble there as well, and Egypt said no. Actually, they're building a stronger gate to keep them
yeah.
out of Egypt. What is your sense of what's happening there, the struggle for the Palestinian people? Um, can I ask you that?
Yeah, I'm fine with the question. I think my sense is shallow, but I'll give it to you anyways.
Okay.
Um, I think, once again, I met a lot of Palestinian people with not an aggressive bone in their body, but perhaps over time some resentment has built up over, you know, we can lay out the events
Hmm.
from either side quite easily, but
Well,
um,
I would resent it if I was behind a wall too. So just
I
saying.
look, my understanding is that the people that perpetrated the attack on October 7th were, let's say they're 25 years old, right?
Hmm.
And so is Gaza. They have lived in a cage all their lives,
Right.
right? So uh, I don't approve of the behavior, but
No.
I'm not totally surprised by it either.
Hmm.
My point was that I've met many, 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 many um, wonderful Palestinians. And I don't doubt that there's some bad apples in there, even perhaps amongst the ones I met, or others. But uh, fomenting and magnifying these differences leads to, uh, you know, finger pointing and desperate acts, and then retaliation. I mean, the region invented an eye for an eye, I think, right? I don't know if the response has been symmetrical and appropriate. 1,400 in exchange for, I don't know, we're probably going to go 100,000 on
Yeah.
Gaza. So uh, my point is that uh, there's a group of people there. What moniker they survive with, whether that's Palestinian or Arab or Bedouin, whatever. There was a time when these families were perfectly peaceful with other religions and other neighbors.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Uh, Many hundreds of the past thousands of years, that's been the case.
Hmm.
So, what have we been doing differently, and how can we dry that up? Well, starts with the flow of funds to extremist elements that have agendas that are um, different, and actually, that kind of goes both ways. We think we're just talking about uh, Iran and its proxies, but
Mhm.
they're extremists on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, 9/11 too, right? It was financed by the Saudis, wasn't it? By the family, Bin Laden family,
yeah,
Saudi.
they are Saudis. They are not Saud,
Okay,
right?
there's a
So
difference. So
they
that
lived in the
that's
kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and a tremendous amount of their wealth came from construction in Saudi.
right.
Um, the prime perpetrator was Osama, who you basically had fomented or revolution in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen, right?
Hmm.
He learned
Right.
from the Mujahideen.
No,
He
he was a CIA agent at one time. So.
There you go. And when Desert Storm 1 was brewing,
Mhm.
it was him that volunteered to come back to Saudi and raise an army and protect them.
Mm.
Now, the Saud family has seen this movie before, and they don't take kindly to uh, raising armies on their own soil,
Mhm.
especially ones that could be confused later for a political opponent. So they chose the Americans.
Right.
This pissed off Osama, and that led to 9/11.
That's a view I've never heard before, so I appreciate that. That's what's interesting about these conversations. You learn a different nugget about history. Um,
I'm a storyteller, not a
right.
historian. I couldn't cite chapter and verse for that, but I have it on good authority. That's how
Okay.
it went down.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. So it sounds like it's the extremism, and you can have Christian extremism, obviously Jewish extremism, and Muslim or Islamic extremism that seem to be causing problems in the world. Um, just looking at it, anytime you take it really extreme, like the differences between the religions, it causes a big conflict. And I know in Canada, we've had 22 instances of ISIS K groups and people arrested. And in the past couple of years, um, this extremism is going all across the world now. As a result, they've exported it or we've imported it. I don't know how to explain it. Um, you were just saying about for hundreds of years all the religions got along.
Hmm.
How do we can we get back to that? How is that going to happen? Or are we on a trajectory where there's going to be more hurt than there is now in the world?
Well, I think, look, hundreds of years of religions getting along, I certainly generalize there. I'm sure
Mhm.
there was some blood let along the way. But today, with social media and the rest, we learn about it like that,
Yes, we do.
right? And so I
Welcome to
think
YouTube. Yeah.
that's right. I I think the receiver of that information needs to ask themselves, am I in danger?
Mhm.
Could I change this? Right? Uh, and what's it actually mean for my future? If the answer to two or three of those three items is not much, you need to move on. Someone's making money by selling advertising off of your views,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
If you go down the rabbit hole, they're just making more. I come from that business. That's dopamine.
Mhm.
And Yeah, it's scary, but the fact of the matter was, when when the Titanic sunk, we probably didn't know it in the newspapers for 2 or 3 days. Today they'd be live streaming on their way down.
Mhm.
And so we must, as receivers of this information, kind of have more of a stoic point of view. And it's like, it's unless it's on my block, let's go on with life and uh, do what we need to do.
In other
Uh,
words, you're drawing a line in the sand if
on my block, that's right. Look, I'm well informed, and my family is well protected because of um, our access to technology and the rest, but never entirely. So um, good practices and good judgment are still important. But yes, like, when you think to yourself that ISIS was this thing over there,
Hmm.
and now there's a report of it in your hometown, Toronto,
Hmm.
wherever, um, that's supposed to be over there. That's why we're isolationists, right?
That is
Uh,
that's
that,
entirely it, and Syria too as well. Um,
yeah,
another country ravaged by war and extremism that at one time, an old Roman colony was quite the
absolutely.
attraction and jewel of the Mideast,
Absolutely.
right?
A jewel.
Yeah.
Um, it was referred to as such by the Arabs when they were during the revolt and trying to get to Damascus, but that wasn't just a waypoint. I mean, that was uh, the jewel of the Middle East. It's an oasis town. It's a trading town. Not real big on the petroleum, but they didn't know that 100 years ago.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, Roman colonies. It probably has more archaeological UNESCO sites than perhaps anywhere else in the world. I think there's 50,000 of them, or there were
Right.
10 years ago. I don't know how many of those have been desecrated in the
Well,
most
especially in
recent.
Afghanistan, the Buddhist statues have been destroyed, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just something else. So, if, gathering from our conversation, the people on the extreme, the people in the Mid East just want to live their lives, right? And and
Most of them, just
most of
like the
them,
people in Pittsburgh.
right? Or in Edmonton, Alberta, or something like that, right? Um, the extremists, well, they go to war. They have a grudge. Do Arabians keep grudges as a people, or is that something?
I believe that I don't think that's unique to their culture,
No,
but
not at all.
I think it's a well developed muscle.
Right.
Um,
I
so
like the way you phrase that. That's spot on.
yeah,
Yeah.
well developed. Look, we're going on if you believe our theory in the book, we're going on 100 years
Right.
of grudge one way or the other, and it's sort of directed really at Paris, London, Washington,
Mm.
but that's an ocean away, right? So what do we have nearby that we can exact a toll on? That's basically a stationary aircraft carrier of the United States.
Mm.
Well, uh, that is one theory as to why Israel is bearing the brunt of the animosity
Mhm.
coming from countries just to their east, not Jordan, but east of there, is that it's too far to get to America. And they look just like them. They speak a
Mhm.
lot of English. It's our proxy.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
ironically, America didn't create it.
Right.
It's certainly, if you look at the dollars from APAC, politicians in the United States, certainly is supported.
Hmm.
But you can't tag Americans with the creation of that.
No, that was the United Nations thing. Even Britain left at the time, so
Yeah, well, yes,
they gave
Britain,
it up.
okay, Britain had had
They
enough.
washed their hands.
They had it. They walked on that vote.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I wouldn't. I think that they were looking for a rubber stamp at the
Yeah, a
UN.
little arm twisting going on in the back. Yeah,
Yes, yes. I believe that that was created by European powers
right.
as a solution to predominantly European social problems. And look, America has since that time, remember, the natural resources power the growth, right?
Hmm. It's
And
all
so
economics. Yeah,
so having a stationary aircraft carrier
fair enough.
there
Right.
24/7. It seems to make strategic sense.
Right. And it's an oxymoron in a way because United States didn't let Jewish people into the country during the Second World War and banned them.
Oh, well said. My understanding is consistent with that. Look, like, everybody wanted this group to move,
Right.
but nobody was stepping up and saying where,
Right.
right? And then there was this I would say biblical hook, but yeah, ancient religious hook,
Hmm.
and at least two of the three religions of the desert acknowledged that that was an area. And there were already, as you pointed out, some Jews there.
Oh yeah. No, there
Uh,
was. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just a slim minority at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and so that
I think back in the old days, the Palestinian kingdom was a Jewish kingdom too, as well.
I will
South
subscribe to
Israel.
that. Yes, I will subscribe to that. It's King David and the rest.
Right.
You can debate back to the dinosaurs as
Oh,
to
you could. There's got to come someday. It's got to stop. I don't know how. I don't know when. But all this killing going on is not conducive to a good world, is it, my friend?
No, I believe talk about this a little bit in the book because one of the mentees, the young kids that we were mentoring, brought up the point that
Mhm.
for every terrorist you take out,
Right.
you may have created two with his sons.
I don't doubt it.
Right,
Especially sons seeing their dads killed in front of them
right in
and
front of them.
stuff.
Right. So if if 100,000 people are gone in Gaza in the last 12 months, including famine and
Right.
pestilence and disease and the rest, um, then that's a 250,000
100%.
coming back at you.
That's right. Well, let's hope it resolves in a good way. What would you like the audience to know about what we were discussing here? Is there any words that you would like to leave us with?
Yes, the last page of the book, I won't spoil the whole thing,
Oh, a
but
page turner. Yeah.
five uh there are five things written on a piece of stationery from the Majestic Hotel, which is where some of the movers and shakers in the Paris Peace Conference were holed up. T.E. Lawrence, Gertrude Bell, Faisal Wilson, the rest. And on that piece of stationery was written um, five things. One of them was grandmothers deserve to hug their children and their grandchildren.
Mm.
And if you set that up as a goal, that means you have intergenerational life in a place
Right.
on both sides, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Knowing grandmothers are probably cooking for people, so they're gathering around the table, solving the problems of the world,
Hmm.
connecting with each other. Um, and I'll leave you with one of the five, and that is grandmothers deserve to hug their grandchildren.
That's so apt. The words are so apt. Where can people find you out in the social media? I will
So
put your link into the show notes for sure.
appreciate that. I write a blog on milesspencer.com. That's all my other crazy ideas. Once again, solving the problems of the world, not very well on a regular basis. But this is really about the book, which also includes a paper in an Audible. I think Eduardo Ballerini's Audible version of our same words sounds so much better than our words. I've listened to it and been stunned, but however you like to hear a good story and be tricked into learning some history, I'm good for that. We're all Amazon, nowhere else. Designed it that way. And um, you know, I promise that if you read and enjoy the book, there will be more.
Excellent. Most excellent. You know,
All
thank
good.
you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much. You're a busy fellow. As things change in the Mideast, could I reach out to you and maybe have another conversation down the road?
Anytime you like, Walter.
Well, I'd appreciate it.